Okay, now, I normally don't do stuff like this. I normally stick my quotes up on the wall, but I thought this one was appropriate in several ways. I like coming, especially when I can grab them from presidents and famous people. So this one I heard this morning on the radio on the way here. I looked it up when I got here to make sure I quoted him correctly. It says, if you could kick the person in the pants responsible for most of your trouble, you wouldn't sit for a month. Think about that for a second. While you're pondering that, just a reminder on a few things that you've got to help you out here. And this is where I kind of want to put this together, okay? And I know some of you don't have a lot of access to internet. Some of you have it everywhere. It depends. But again, on the website, we got video lessons. If you don't have that, see me. I've got DVDs I can give you. I've got times I'm here before and after. And most of you, when you're here before anyway, whether it be on first hour, you know, come and see me a couple minutes early. Let's get some stuff set. Thank you. Retakes on quizzes. I was just talking about that. If you just got your quiz back and you're not happy with it, let's talk about a couple of things at one of these times and retake it and get a better grade. Okay? And then the homework key binders up here, and we always talk about questions at the start of class, so take advantage of those sorts of things, okay, when they're available, and hopefully we can keep you from having some of the struggles that you continue to have. Now, on to a more right now pertinent thing. I'm going to have to zoom in here a little bit because I don't want to be that far out. There we go. Inequalities, we're going to talk about this, again, one more day. This first one, okay, is the note sheet. This won't come into me on the homework check, but yes, this is the one that some of you, when you struggle on quizzes, and I understand that, can use them on the quizzes. Let me repeat that. Can use them on, oh, that's my face, we don't need that. Can use them on the quizzes. And I didn't see many of you using them back on Friday with the quiz. So take advantage of this, okay? So, again, inequalities. A couple of things we want to make note of here at the top before we even get into this stuff, because I think this was one of the issues we ran into. If you have an X and the arrow is pointing at it, it may not always be on the left. We like it on the left because then we can just follow it. But if, for instance, my X ends up on the right sometime, notice the arrow is still pointing at X. Okay, Damon. Out and off. Thank you. So these are both less than. My values are going down, which makes sense. Less, you have less, okay? However, because again, watch for little things. Arrow's pointing at X. If the arrow is eating X, and again, it doesn't matter which side the X is on, it's all about what's the arrow doing. If it's eating X, that's when we get into something that's greater than. My values are getting bigger. So, when I start looking at this, it's like, okay, if X is less than 5, what's a value that's less than 5? Okay. What else? I don't care if it's a ridiculous number. Or negative 127. Okay? They're all less than 5. So when I go to graph this, so somebody could look just at my graph and understand how this works, what we're going to do is we're going to get 3 numbers. Okay, thank you. Is we're going to get 3 numbers. Is that number that's in our inequality, the 5, always gets to start in the middle. And then again, keep thinking about it like you would money. If I have $1 less, I put that to the left. If I have $1 more, I put that to the right. And like we spoke about before, no arrow gives us a nice big open circle on that number, and less than always goes to the left. And that kind of is nice because less than and left both start with L. And I just put an arrow on it, and I'm good to go. And the idea here is to start looking at things and understanding them number-wise. Then it gets easier to do this other stuff. If you just look at it and go, I don't know, that gets a little bit tricky. So here, X is greater than. because the arrow is eating X. Okay, so if I owe somebody $3, what's a better situation to be in? Is it better if I owe them $5? Probably not. Let's see. It's better if I only owe them $2. It's even better yet if I don't owe them anything. It's even better yet if they owe me $3. Okay? So here's again what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking that way with these. When you think about greater and you're thinking about those numbers, you're like, okay, so -3 goes in the middle. And the situation that's better for us, if we're thinking about money-wise, needs to go to the right. Well, I'd rather only owe them $2. Okay? I don't want to owe them $4. Now I owe them more. And think about it as far as, a good situation for you with money, and that's a good way to think about it. And then if it's going to be greater than, that's better for me. More is better. So I'm like, okay, if more is better, I like the situation to the right better, because I'm getting closer to being out of debt to this person. And that's how I can think about it being greater. -2 is better than -3. And then my last one, the only difference between it and number 2 is that now I got this line underneath, this or equal to. So it's still greater than, but it's also or equal to. So you're like, okay, start with that number in the middle. And again, keep thinking about what's a better situation for you with money. I'd rather owe somebody $9 than $10, so I'll put that on the right. Ooh, but I would much rather not owe somebody $11 than $10, so that goes on the left. Left is not good for us. That's when we have less. So again, if it's greater than -10, I might owe them $9. I might owe them $1. Shoot, even better yet, maybe they owe me $10. Okay. Those are all numbers, though, that I'm going to the right. So I know my arrow goes to the right. But now with that little line underneath, I have to let people know that number is included, so I got to color in my dot with it. It's just understanding numbers, basically. And again, just some clues down here to your left, which again come in nice on a quiz. Okay. When the arrow's eating X, my arrow goes to the right. Doesn't matter where my X is. Arrow points at X, my arrow goes to the left. And we talked about that up at the top. No line under the arrow, it's open. Okay, if the arrow has a line under it, didn't put this part. Use a closed dot. So you've got all these things here to kind of give you some hints, and all I ever ask you to do is to try them out. And then we'll kind of see what we can do and make it better if it's not going well, and if it's going great, awesome. So show on each number line all possible values for X, and we can just do that with a line. We don't have to write out, who'd want to write out every number greater than 3? That'd take a long time. But again, when we're doing these, always 3 points, always going to put our number in the middle. One value better for us, I'd rather have $4 than 3 on the right. One value less, oops, I'd rather not have $2 than 3 over on the left. And then there's always 2 questions. Is my dot for this one going to be open or closed? Open, because there's no line underneath. And again, this says X is greater than 3. The arrow is eating my X. So greater than means my values get bigger as I go to the right. And I'm good. That's all there is to it. Okay. With negatives, again, be careful. Think money. If I owe somebody $2, what's the next best situation? I only owe them $1. Better situation to the right. Worst situation, oops, I borrowed another $1. Now I owe them 3. Over here to the left. Again, I notice there's no line underneath, so it's an open circle. And less than, arrow pointing at X, my arrow goes to the left because that's where my values get less, or I owe people more. That's no good. And I just want to do one of the fraction ones because I don't want some of you to think you need to avoid them. You're like, yeah, but I don't like fractions. Well, I understand that. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run them the same way I ran the other ones. So like notice here, I just go down one each time. I'm going to keep the same number on the bottom of my fraction. But now I'm just going to say if I owed somebody $3, I'd rather only owe them 2. I'm still going to have a fraction, but I'm just going to think about it as far as the top number goes. If I owe them 3, I'd rather not owe them 4. Okay, so I don't have to be a fractions expert to make this work. Once I get that done, I see a line underneath, so it'll be a closed dot. And then greater than goes to the right. My arrow eats my x, arrow to the right, greater than, because my values are getting bigger. That's all we're up to here. And then all we do after that is kind of go back to what we were doing before, except the equations are going to get a little bit bigger. So for instance, I look here and I go, okay, whenever I see an x in one of these, that's my goal. Get that alone. So what's my opposite going to be? Thank you. What's my opposite going to be of subtracting 5 from x? Adding 5. Okay, so we're going to plus 5. X is alone. Keep everything else the same, and now it just looks like the ones we are doing right above it. And you will. Once you start doing these, you'll get onto a roll. You're like, okay, I'd rather have $14 than 13. Ooh, but 12's less. Yeah, I don't want less. And then just ask yourself the 2 big questions. Is it an open or a closed dot? Well, if there's a line underneath, it's closed. And if your x is on the left and being pointed at, we just follow the arrow. Go to the left. And that's all there is to them. Now, are all of them going to be one step like they were before? Well, no, not quite so much anymore. So here's what we're going to do now that we get this. You're like, ooh, don't know if I like this quite so much. Okay. When I get to a one with a fraction, doesn't mean we have to skip it. But we're always going to take care of this part first. So when I'm looking at a fraction, the bottom number basically means I'm dividing by that. So what's the opposite of dividing something by 3? Multiplying. So here's my first job. I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do both. I have to be equal. This 3 is only here to cancel out the 3 in the fraction. I don't times the 2 by it. Okay, they just cancel. So then I see I got a 2x left here. And then 14 times 3, I could go to my calculator for that. It would be 42. But x isn't quite alone by itself. I still got this 2 that's stuck next to it that I'm multiplying by. So what's my last step to get x alone? Divide it by 2, because that's the opposite of multiply. So x is greater than or equal to 21. And we just start up our little process here one more time. Put that number in the middle. Add 1 to the right. Subtract 1 to the left. And I'm going to let you guys answer the 2 questions for me this time. Is my dot on 21 going to be open or closed? Closed, because we got the line underneath our arrow. That's right. And then speaking of the arrow, what way is my arrow going to be going? Right, because my arrow is eating x. Arrow eating x is greater than, and my values get bigger as I go to the right. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And it'll change from problem to problem. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't. But my goal is always to get x alone. If you need to box it in to remind you of what to do first, that's okay. Whatever's not in the box needs to go away. In this case, plus 7 needs to go away. How do I dump it? minus the 7. Okay, if we can keep those basic opposites, keep track of those, these really aren't too terribly awful. And then just like we did in the last one, we're multiplying x by 2, and I want to get x alone, so I'm going to divide by 2. So I've got my inequality. I did the hard part now. I'm going to make my 3 lines, put my 7 in the middle. And again, it's the same idea. Add 1 to the right, subtract 1 to the left, and then it's just the same 2 questions. No line, no fill in. And x is less than, my values become less as I go to the left. And again, that's how these are going to work. I want to look at 2 more here. Let's see. Let's look at the next 2. We'll look at 11 and 12, and then I'll work on a couple of the homework ones with you. So, all right, number 11, job 1. Get x alone. How do I dump this? What's the opposite of what I'm pointing at? Okay, plus 11. So I wipe that out. Add my 11. Oh, I see trouble brewing here. So then I'm like, okay, just like here, my last step's to divide by 6, but wait a minute, I wonder if I did something wrong because I'm getting a decimal. Not necessarily, okay? Getting a decimal is okay. So I get 2.5. No problem. Put that right in the middle. And if I keep doing the same thing where I add 1 and subtract 1, okay, so if I have $2.50 and I add $1, I have $3.50. If I have $2.50 and I lose $1, I have $1.50. And again, if sometime you're not sure on that, just use the calculator. Use the middle number, plus 1, put that here, minus 1, put it on the other side. No line under. We're open circling it. And again, arrow eats x is greater than. My values get greater as I go to the right. Okay. I got one more twist I'm throwing at you on these. Just one. Okay, and that's number 12. Now this wasn't very nice of me. I notice there's more than one x term this time, and they're on the same side of the same side of the arrow, excuse me. If they're on the same side, I don't do an opposite, okay, because they're on the same team. So if I have 8 and take away 5, how many have I got left? 3. Okay, again, no opposites on that, because they're on the same side. So I'm like, okay, well now it kind of looks like the last couple. Now that all my x's are together, I want to get them alone. So I got to get the plus 2 out of there. And once I do that, it seems pretty straightforward. Because again, multiplying by 3, the opposite is to divide. And once I have x alone, that one goes in the middle. Plus 1 to the right. Minus 1 to the left. Let's see here. No line underneath, so it's not or equal to, so we stay open. And the arrow is pointing at x, which means less than. And less than goes to the left. Now again, keep this sheet out. Keep it handy when you're working on inequalities, even on the quiz, okay? Because it just gives you some guidance on what you're trying to do. Now, the actual work with this, and I'll put that back up in a minute if we need to, but just so we can keep being organized well on these. So this one, this is our homework. So this one will be on homework check 3, which is coming up on Friday. This is assignment number 3 on that homework check, because we've still got that review packet that we did last week, along with the adding and subtracting equation sheet, and that list is on the back board if you forget. And what we're doing here is solve the equation or inequality. I'm mixing and matching on you here. You're like, what? So for instance, number 1, notice there's not an arrow, it's an equals sign. What's my one step to get x alone in number 1? Divide 5, okay? And I want to see what you're up to. So negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. Now, if you like being able to see if you're right as you're going along, yes, ma'am? Or are you just stretching? You're just stretching. Sure can. So, as you're blowing through these, you might look and you might say, well, there's graphs of all of these down here, but there's no arrow, so how can I do a graph? Well, if you ever just have an equation, you can find an individual point. So it said x is negative 3. Well, this one, there's a dot on negative 3, so that's how this would work. So since that says letter n, if I wanted to do the puzzle on the bottom here, I'd find number 1, and I'd put n's where those are at. And it's kind of nice because then you know your answers are right. I do want to take a look at a couple others though, including the one that was mentioned. All right, we are going to take a look. Come back down here. We're going to take a look at 4, 5, and then 13. I think I did a boo-boo, but I will still do that one because I shouldn't have y's and x's together. That just doesn't make any sense. All right, so number 4. First job. Get the x term alone, the 1/2 x. So how do I dump what's outside the box? Subtract that 3. Whack that out of there. And then again, remember, whenever we have a fraction, if we multiply by the number in the denominator, the number on the bottom, we'll get rid of it. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to both. So those get whacked. 1x is the same thing as plain old x. And 1 times 2 is 2. Now let's see if we're fortunate here and find that one down below. We do. There it is. Okay, so that's G. So, oh, that's number 4 though, Harty. Number 4. G. Okay, that's better. But again, just take your time and again, go back to the note sheet if you have to. But number 5's kind of nasty. And here's why. These are on opposite sides of the arrow, so I can't just put them together and say it's like 24x. That wouldn't work. I got to put them all together. Now, I like having them on the left side. That's just me. You may think of it differently. Some of you may say, well, I like having it positive better. And actually, you know what? Let's do that. So if I want to get those together, I'm going to take the smaller number, the 10, I'm going to subtract that to both sides. And then I'm going to rewrite everything I have left. Now the x's are gone on this side now. 14 minus 10 is 4. All right, so far so good. Now again, my goal here, trying to get x alone. How do I dump this? What's the opposite of minusing 13? Add 13. Okay, so that goes away. Now some of you are like, well, wait a minute though. Negative 13 plus 13 cancels. Okay, but let's put a 0. We'll hold the place. We only got one step to go here. But you're like, but it's 0. That's okay. Just like before, since we're multiplying by 4, we're going to divide both sides by 4. Don't move the x to the other side just because you want to. We got to leave it where it's at. And that's okay, because now we know if we're not sure, we can say, wait a minute, the arrow is eating x. Now, wait a minute, arrow is eating x. Arrow eats x. Arrow goes to the right. Okay, arrow goes to the right. So I go down and I start looking. There's 0, okay. There's a line underneath my arrow, that's good. And it goes to the right, sweet. So number 5 is S. Oh, they even gave me that one. Shoot, well I had to show work anyway. So that I feel a little bit better about. Now 13, I want to look at this for a minute because I have a feeling that is supposed to be X, but I want to make sure. Well, we're going to make it X. So watch this, 13, that Y you see, we're making it an X because we shouldn't have Y's in here. That's kind of crazy. So let's do this first. If I have 3 X's and I take 1 away, how many X's have I got left? Got 3 and take 1. 2. So then I look at the other side and I'm like, well, wait a minute. This 2 and this negative 9 are just numbers. Can I put them together? Absolutely. So if I got $2 and then I, oops, go out and spend 9, how far in the hole am I? Okay, negative 7. But the 3x is still there. I couldn't add the x in. It has x's. So you're like, well, shoot, now I still have x's everywhere. That's okay. Let's get all the x's together. So since they're on this side, let's just move them over there. So I got a positive 3x. I'm going to do an opposite. Holy cow. It's finally starting to come together here. So I got rid of my x's over here. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And again, if you need the calculator to help you out, I say go for it. But here comes the last thing that can kind of put a little bit of a wrench in on things. If I'm multiplying by negative 1 here, what's the opposite? Divide. And if I divide by a negative, which I'm doing, that's right, we have to flip the arrow. If you ever divide both sides by a negative or multiply both sides by a negative, so here I'm dividing both sides by a negative 1, when I write my x, my arrow goes from pointing to the right to pointing to the left. X is less than 7. Okay, let's see if we can find one with 7 here. Let's move this up. There's a 7, okay. Open circle, yes, we're okay still. And less than, my values are getting less as I go to the left. Sweet, okay. So 13 is I. So your job, let's see, we did 4 of these. So we did 4, your job is to try and do the other 9. And you've got hints with these at the right. You've got your note sheet to give you some examples that look kind of similar to these. So work through these, because again, that next homework check's going to be the end of this week. So kind of work them as you go through, and it should be all right.